If thou should call me to resign what most I prize, it ne'er was mine. I only yield thee what is thine. Thy will be done.
July 19th, 1864, midday. The near burning of the Morgans' home, Falling Springs. Anna Morgan Getzendanner wrote of the experience of the son of Colonel William Augustine Morgan, the then very young Augustine C. Morgan.
The day of the Shepherdstown burnings, while roaming through the woods, I heard men's voices, excitedly giving orders, and then a sound as of flames roaring, and soon I perceived the house of our good neighbor, Boatler's Fountain Rock, to be burning. The barn also was afire, and as the roof fell, there was a terrible crash which frightened me not a little. This fire was destroying a beautiful southern home, the residence of an officer on General Robert E. Lee's staff. I ran to tell Mother, but already she had seen the destruction and had gathered the children and servants into a terrified group, for we feared our home, Falling Springs, would be the next invaded. It was not long when we saw the soldiers in their blue coats rapidly approaching. The foremost man doffed his cap and informed my mother that he held an order issued by General Hunter to destroy and burn our house. We all became panicky with terror, but were permitted to save what we needed most for Mother and the children. Almost despairing of saving our home, my mother interviewed the officer and asked if the order was correctly understood. The officer asked if our home were not Bedford. Finding his mistake, he soon apologized, and learning that Bedford was an adjoining farm, withdrew his men and repaired at once to the home of a near kinsman of General Lee. Leaving Liza and old Ned to restore our belongings to their proper places, my mother donned her war pockets and, taking me by the hand, led me quickly to Bedford. But as the soldiers had preceded us, already their fiendish work had begun. There was little one could do to save anything valuable from destruction. My mother and a daughter of the house, in attempting to save a feather bed, found their efforts useless, as the rear of the bed was burning. So here was another old southern home, laid in ashes. I remember it as a long, low house with dormer windows and a spacious portico, its roof supported with columns taken from the old ship Constitution. The home sat high upon a grassy slope, and the grounds were terraced to the turnpike. The burning of a house was a terrible thing to me as I stood watching the destruction of the cruel soldiers. They had piled furniture in a central part of the house, sandwiched it with straw, and emptied jugs of kerosene over it all. When the match or torch was applied, the result was indeed a conflagration. Sadly, we returned homeward and found things replaced with but little loss. Henrietta Lee described Bedford, her ancestral home in Shepherdstown.
Bedford, a brick residence built on a knoll, had a 2-story central portico flanked by rambling wings. The lofty front portico with its soaring pointed roof was supported by 4 huge white wooden columns whose bases and caps had been carved from the splintered, battle-scarred masts of the United States frigate Constitution. Daniel Bettinger, while commandant of the Norfolk Naval Yard, had bought chunks of the historic wood when old Ironsides had been brought there for refitting. One entered from the portico by way of the parlor, a large room furnished with high-backed sofas and chairs, with portraits lining the wall in such a manner to focus attention of a portrait taken from the life of General Washington, wearing gold epaulets. A door led from the parlor into the spacious dining room with a crystal chandelier, imported glassware and silverware, and the spacious, well-stocked library.
July 19th, 1864, late afternoon. The burning of the Lees' home, Bedford.
It was the afternoon of July the 19th, 1864. Mother had been ill in bed for some days, but on that date she was able to dine with us, and later she came upstairs to my room where I made her take a nap. Harry, then 14 years of age, was the only member of the family home. He had gone to the dairy and with the assistance of 2 young Negroes had made a freezer of ice cream. At the dinner table, Mother had given him permission to do this, provided he did not use up all of the one and only nutmeg to be found on our side of the Potomac, nor more than 1 cupful of the last of our sugar. She laughed as she said, "How can it be fit to eat?" "Well, Harry," said I, "you bring me a taste of it if it's clean and you wash your hands." So just as Mother awoke from her nap, Harry came running up bearing a cup and a saucer, each containing a helping of very presentable ice cream. "Mother, I brought each of you a taste of my cream. We thought it so good that maybe you would eat just a little, because I made it, you know." Well, Mother barely tasted hers, simply to please the boy, but I ate all of mine. Then Harry left us, and Mother finished her nap. I had been writing a letter on my little mahogany lap desk, purchased from the sutler's store with money given me at Christmas by Mother, and purchased after paying a duty of 10%. The cup which had held my cream was on the floor, and presently a little mouse crept up to it and dipped his paw into the bottom and licked it, much as a child would have done. Well, I was much absorbed in this little performance when Aunt Peggy appeared with a small basket of blackberries she had gathered along the Charlestown road. And after bemoaning the scarcity of berries, Peggy continued, "While I was there, a lot of Yankees came along, more than a dozen, and the captain, he said, 'Old woman, are there any Rebs in Shepherdstown?'" "And what did you say, Peggy?" I asked her. "Oh, I just told him I don't know anything about it." Then he cussed, and he said, "Where were the last ones in town?" And I said, "I told you once, I don't know anything at all about any rebels." Well, then he cussed again and said to the other soldiers, "Boys, you just go ahead to the edge of town and I'll slowly follow. Then you all can tell me what you can find out." And then he said, pointing to me, "That ain't nothing but a damn old sea-sesh Negro anyhow." So they went on to town, and I come on to the house because there ain't any berries anywhere, and I was afraid they'd take those that if I stayed till they come back from town, and I didn't want them Yankees to cuss me anymore and call me names. That nasty poor white trash they are anyhow. I just know, Miss Netta, they're after some kind of deviltry anyhow. Well, with this warning, Aunt Peggy departed, but a few minutes later she burst into my room crying, Oh, Miss Henrietta, Miss Netta, look over to Colonel Boatler's, just look."
In less than an hour from the time the soldiers started their work of destruction, the company was filing down the avenue on its way to Bedford, the home of Edmund Jennings Lee. Just as the soldiers started off, Virginia Bettinger and her little brother Harry, who lived at nearby Poplar Grove, arrived at Fountain Rock, their faces white with distress and sympathy. "Go back to your home, Aunt Henrietta. They are coming there next." But the captain interrupted, "Not before we do," and thus prevented their giving warning to the Lee household. When the squad of men, however, had gone well over the hill, Virginia and Harry ran across the field and reached Bedford first. Mrs. Lee and Netta were just starting on their way to Fountain Rock, but old Sally had brought them word of the burning of the house, and Mrs. Lee had gotten out of sickbed to fly to her friend's home. "Those children are all alone, Netta. Their mother's in Baltimore. I must go. Tibby was with us when the Leland was burned in 1856. I must go. and she insisted. But Virginia's frantic gestures made them pause, and when she came panting up and told the others to burn their own loved home, they turned back to the pitiful tasks of saving what they could. A number of Negroes on the place and some of the townspeople dragged out the parlor furniture and then secured Mr. Lee's valuable law papers, which were hidden under the parlor floor. But Captain Martindale and his men came up in time to prevent further work. The soldiers were rougher in their behavior than they had been at Fountain Rock, but one man sat down in weary protest against the services required of him and declared that he would not lift his finger in such work. The pale-faced soldier, who helped the sisters at Fountain Rock, helped at Bedford also, but after all, the little store of rescued goods made but a pathetic showing for the two homeless families. Mrs. Henrietta Bedinger Lee wrote the following month to her cousin her exact account. The recipient was likely Benjamin Franklin Bedinger, who lived in Kentucky, with views more northern.
August 1864. My dear friend, according to your earnest request, I will send you an exact account of the burning of my beautiful old home by the United States troops under Captain Martindale of the New York Cavalry. And I performed the task with a sick heart, as you can imagine. The morning of that eventful day was calm and lovely, no one dreaming that such dire calamity and mischief was near. I, with Netta, my young daughter, and little son, were all the members of my family at home. About 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Harry rushed into my sick room saying, "Oh, Mama, the Yankees have burned Colonel Boteler's house." And at this startling intelligence, I immediately rose and dressed, resolving to go, if possible, to Colonel Boteler's, as there were only 2 helpless ladies and 3 very young children there. I reached the yard when I met my niece, Virginia Bedinger. In breathless haste, she told me that she had just come from Fountain Rock, Colonel Boteler's home, to inform me that Colonel Boteler's house was in flames, and the federal officers were coming to burn my house also, and that she had read the order from General Hunter to that effect. Of course, the scene which followed was one of grief and consternation. In a few moments, the enemy was upon us. I met the captain on the portico when the following conversation took place. "Is this Mrs. Lee?" the captain asked. "It is," I replied. "Well, I've come to burn your house," he said so coolly, "by order of General Hunter. Here, read the order," handing at the same time a printed order to burn the house, its content, and all outbuildings, and signed by General David Hunter. "Well, surely," I replied, you cannot execute such a barbarous, infamous order. Do spare this house. It was built by my father, a revolutionary soldier and officer. Oh, have respect for his memory and his deeds, I implore you. Do not burn this home. It is a noble house." Well, Martindale's reply was in those coarse and unfeeling words. "Lord, woman, you must be a fool. Can I help it? You're old enough to know that. Now I give you 10 minutes to take out your clothing." Oh, I saw from his cold, cruel eyes and the iron hardness of his face that there was no more hope for me, and that farther appeal was useless. What could I do? My mind was too distracted to guide me, and so many memories clustered around my childhood's precious home. I left him and tried to collect some necessary articles, and as I passed my pantry door, Martindale stepped in and seized a decanter. which doubtless he thought contained brandy, but which proved to be blackberry wine. How I did wish it had been drugged with ipecac. Oh, I think this noble captain would have been sick of that day's work. But don't suppose I include all his men in his heartless acts. No, indeed, for some of the soldiers were far more merciful and noble than their leader. After the house was in full blaze, he turned to my niece Virginia Bedford and said in the most insolent and scoffing tone, "Now go in and help yourself." Well, nothing in nature could have been more hard and cruel than that man's whole bearing.
Farewell, my friends, I'm bound for Canaan. I'm traveling through the wilderness. Your company has been delightful. You who doth leave my mind distressed. I go away behind to leave you, perhaps never to meet again. But if we never have the pleasure, I hope we'll meet on Canaan's land.
A group of friends had hastened to me when they discovered what was going on, and with them I was standing on the lawn, gazing at the awful conflagration, for all the outbuildings were burning at the same time. And then, with the most self-important and swaggering step, Martindale approached me and dared to offer me his pity. "I scorn your pity," I cried. "You talk of pity after such an act as this? It is mockery, indeed. The qualities of mercy and pity are strangers to your heart. But, dear, it would make this letter too long to tell you all the burning words that fell from my tongue that day. Let it suffice to say I was warm enough to give it to him in round numbers, I assure you. One lady said to me, "What did you say to that man? He went away looking like a whipped dog." Well, he was a whipped dog. But my home, my blessed, lovely home, the fire ran from base to dome, and as the all-devouring, pitiless flame snapped each wire, the bell of that dear home tolled out its dirge. And what is it now? The blackened walls, the frightful skeleton of what was once so fair, looms up against the sky. And the wind, as it sighs around the ruin, whispers, "Man's inhumanity to man makes countless thousands mourn." The trailing vines are scorched and dead. The flowers bloom there no more. And the bright silver stream, which so added to its beauty and grace, glides in its desolation, murmuring a perpetual requiem for that dead home. My painful task is finished, dear friend. How kind and soothing your sympathy is. We are refugeeing now miles away from that scene of sorrow and dismay. What are we to do without a home? And scant of clothing, the future is too dark to penetrate. But he that feedeth the sparrows and clothed the lilies, and in whom we all trust, will, I know, provide. Ever truly and affectionately your friend and cousin, Henrietta.
Henrietta's daughter, Netta, also recalled that day.
There was one little pale-faced blonde fellow whom I shall never forget. He followed me everywhere, trying to help me when he could elude the vigilance of his captain. One incident made me smile in the midst of my grief and terror. I was standing on the eastern end of the long back porch on the servants' side of the house, watching the train of straw just lighted as the flames crept towards me. Well, I stepped back to the pavement, and when this young man with eyes full of tears came up to me, and he carefully wrapped my heavy fur cape around my shoulders. On a hot July day, as I was standing between two blazes, as if it was midwinter and I was cold. Well, possibly I was shivering from nervousness. But both of us looked and smiled, and I took the cape to add to the armful of clothing I had rescued. Recalled young Augustine Morgan.
The next day, July 20, 2 Yankees rode up to our door, one being wounded. His blue coat, open at the throat, showed in the front of his shirt splotches of blood. He moaned with pain while the other soldier supported him. He asked my mother if she would not care for the wounded man who had been shot in the arm. But the maimed soldier proudly protested and insisted that no rebel woman should dress his wound. But my gentle mother quite won him over, and I sent for Liza, who brought clean linen and fresh water. The arm was finally dressed, bandaged, and the soldier made comfortable.
The following day, Mrs. Lee writes a letter of protest to General Hunter, the originator of the order to burn her home, a letter which unfortunately for many got into the hands of Confederate General Jubal Early, who took revenge on the town of Chambersburg. The letter has been called by some a masterpiece of sublime invective. She wrote,
Jefferson County, July 20th, 1864. General Hunter. Yesterday, your underling, Captain Martindale, of the 1st New York Cavalry, executed your infamous order and burned my house, Bedford. You have had the satisfaction ere this of receiving from him the information that your orders were fulfilled to the letter. I, therefore, a helpless woman whom you have cruelly wronged, address you, a Major General of the United States Army, and demand why this was done. What was my offense? My husband, Edmund Jennings Lee, was absent, an exile. He had never been a politician or in any way engaged in the struggle now going on, his age preventing. The house was built by my father, Lieutenant Daniel Bettinger, a revolutionary soldier who served the whole 7 years for your independence. There was I born, and there the sacred dead repose. It was my house and my home. And there was your niece, Miss Griffith, who has tarried among us all this horrid war up to the present time, met with all kindness and hospitality at my hands. Was it for this that you turned me, my young daughter and little son, out upon the world without a shelter? Or was it because my husband is the grandson of the revolutionary patriot and rebel Richard Henry Lee, and the near kinsman of the greatest of generals, Robert E. Lee? You and your government have failed to conquer, subdue, or match him, and your disappointment, rage, and malice find vent on the helpless and inoffensive. Hyena-like, you have torn my heart to pieces. For all hallowed memories clustered around that homestead, and demon-like, you have done it without even the pretext of revenge, for I never saw or harmed you. Your office is to lead, like a brave man and soldier, your men to fight in the ranks of war. But your work has been to separate yourself from all danger, and with your incendiary band steal unawares upon helpless women and children to insult and destroy. 2 fair homes did you yesterday ruthlessly lay in ashes, giving not a moment's warning to the startled inmates of your wicked purpose. Turning mothers and children out of doors, you are execrated by your own men for the cruel work you give them to do. One might as well hope to find mercy and feeling in the heart of a wolf bent on his prey of young lambs as to search for such quality in Martindale's bosom. You have chosen well your agent for such deeds, and doubtless will promote him. A colonel of the Federal Army has stated to me that you deprived 40 of your officers of their commands because they refused to carry out your malignant mischief. I say all honor to their names for this at least. They are men. They have human hearts and blush for such a commander. I ask, who that does not wish infamy and disgrace attached to him forever would serve under you? Your name will stand on history's page as the hunter of weak women and innocent children, the hunter to destroy defenseless villages and refined and beautiful homes, to torture afresh the agonized hearts of widows, the hunter with the relentless heart of a wild beast, the face of a fiend and the form of a man. O earth, behold the monster. Can I say, God forgive you? No prayer can be offered for you. Were it possible for human lips to raise your name heavenward, angels would thrust the foul thing back again and demons claim their own. The curses of thousands, the scorn of the manly and upright, and the hatred of the true and honorable will follow you and yours through all time and brand your name infamy. Infamy. Again, I demand, why have you burned my home? Answer, as you must answer before the searcher of all hearts. Why have you added this cruel, wicked deed to your many crimes? Signed, Henrietta Bedinger Lee.
Mid pleasures and palaces, though I may roam, be it ever so humble, there's no place like home. A charm from the sky seems to hallow us there, which seek through the world is ne'er met with elsewhere. Home, home, sweet, sweet home, there's no place like home. There's no place like home.